Good evening, I'm Dennis Ward. Welcome to APTN National News. Alarming numbers of people dying from the toxic drug supply continues to skyrocket in British Columbia. Joining us now is APTN's Tina House.
The toxic drug crisis continues to wreak havoc here in BC. Just today, BC's chief coroner released a report stating that 206 people lost their lives just in April. Joining me today is Tracy Letts. Tracy, you're with Mum Stop the Harm. Tell me about your organization and what you do there.
Hi, Mum Stop the Harm is a network of Canadian families who have suffered harms in regards to toxic drug supply, bad drug policy, and fatalities that come with that.
So obviously mothers that have lost loved ones and fathers, including you've also been affected by this crisis yourself?
I have been. I've been affected in many ways, whether it's supporting those that have lost a loved one or just people that I know, people in my friends group, my children's friends group have lost people that they love.
It's obvious with the numbers. I mean, we were averaging 6 people a day dying. Now we're up to 7. What can be done to stop this crisis, Tracy, in your opinion?
Well, first and foremost, I think what we really need to do is look at getting a real safe supply put in place for those that need it. And, that requires an exemption from Health Canada. And I think that all governments, nonpartisanly, should be working towards that. That's the first thing out of the gate that I think would start to save lives. Then we have to look at recovery options, but they go hand in hand, recovery and a safe supply. You can't have one without the other because we don't have the availability and the recovery options right now, but a safe supply will keep people alive till we get there.
We've heard that over and over. I mean, I've been covering this issue for literally years now. It feels that, once someone's ready to go to detox, they go to detox, but then they got to wait to go into treatment. And then there's sometimes a time delay. By then, they're back on the streets using again. What is the perfect example of what should happen here?
I think what we need right out of the gate is on-demand detox and recovery options. So if you do get into detox, you do your 4, 5 to 6 day program, but then there's somewhere for you to go right away. And that place that you can go is, kind of matches your unique needs because everybody has different needs and what recovery means to them. And it's just we need that continuum all the way through. So once you've done your program, we also need to look at housing, for those that were previously unhoused, because you can't take people and put them right back in the situation they were and expect success.
Absolutely, and many people are saying, well, it's Russian roulette if you're using now, because right now 8 out of 10 parts that they're testing has fentanyl or benzo in it. What else can be done to help this crisis, in your opinion?
I think too, just stigma and within the communities, if we can really look at what's going on and get voters on board. I think this has become a really partisan issue when we actually need all the minds working towards this. We need it to be a nonpartisan, health-related issue and not a political one, and that's what it's turning into.
And finally, do you have any advice for parents out there that have a loved one that are dealing with addiction right now?
I think the first thing is to educate yourself. We really live with inherent bias when it comes to addiction and substance use, but educate yourself. And there is a lot of support groups out there, so that's, reach out and get help for yourself so you can help support those that are using.
Tracy Letts from Mum Stop the Harm, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you and all your work. Thank you very much. Back to you in studio.
Thanks, Tina. To Saskatoon now, where it was a difficult day in provincial court. Earnest Whitehead was sentenced to 2 years and 7 days for committing an indignity to human remains. The sentence is the exact amount of time between Megan Gallagher's disappearance and the discovery of her body near St. Louis last September. And a warning, the details here are graphic. Before 11 victim statements, impact statements were read to the courtroom, we learned more about the night Gallagher was killed. Police received information the Gallagher had been killed in a garage on Weldon Avenue, where Whitehead was living at the time. Gallagher had been tied to a chair and killed in a back room where her upper body was wrapped in plastic wrap and she was covered in a blue tarp. Whitehead and one other accused were called in 2 days later to dispose of the body. They drove out to a bridge near One Arrow First Nation, but were startled by an oncoming vehicle. So they drove to the St. Louis Bridge and disposed of her body there before it was found more than 2 years later. After more than 100 trips to provincial court to try and learn what happened to his daughter, Brian Gallagher and his wife Debbie were able to look Whitehead in the eyes and tell him the pain he's caused everyone.
The ability to speak to them to their face is huge. It's significant. It takes a senseless crime and puts a face to it that we can actually talk, right? You heard me and this is how you made me feel.
One of the things that was also evident in terms of Earnest was that he did, I believe, pay attention to what we were saying. He made eye contact with us. The other two previous, there was very little of that. Earnest, I believe, was making an attempt to hear what we had to say.
Before he was taken away, Whitehead apologized to the Gallaghers for the pain he's caused. Brian Gallagher says he grew up in Saskatoon, blocks away from where his daughter was killed. His family is from the St. Louis area, and she was returned to the family's traditional land. To Ottawa now, and the Trudeau government's Bill C-29, the legislation to establish a National Reconciliation Council, continues to come under fire in the Senate this week. Earlier in the week, Indigenous organizations criticized the government for failing to properly consult them before drafting the bill. Wednesday evening, the Congress of Aboriginal Peoples took the Liberals to task for not guaranteeing that they'd have a seat on the council. Here's what CAP National Vice Chief Kim Bowden had to say.
CAP's exclusion from Bill C-29 kicks sand in the face of a unanimous Supreme Court CAP decision. The Senate needs to correct this and not allow Canada to continue to divide and cherry-pick the Indigenous people they want to work with. Our exclusion means that most Aboriginal people are forgotten.
Still to come, our Truth in Politics panel takes a look at the feasibility study on the landfill search near Winnipeg. Stay with us. Welcome back. A long-awaited study was released last week that says searches for human remains in Winnipeg area landfills may be expensive, but they are necessary. Family and advocates have been saying this all along. Then earlier this week, Winnipeg police identified the dismembered remains found on the bank of the Red River last month as another woman. Tying this to the landfill search is that at least one of the bodies discovered there had also been dismembered. For more, our Truth and Politics panel, Carrie Benjo and Negon Sinclair, are here to discuss. Carrie and Negon, always great to have you both with us, even though this is a very tragic topic. Carrie, I know there's several cases of Indigenous women being recovered from, or not recovered even, from the Red River and landfills in Winnipeg, but this isn't just a Winnipeg issue right now. This crisis seems to be continuing. What's going on, do you think?
Well, there is not enough humanization of Indigenous people, of Indigenous issues. Indigenous women particularly are seen as not as important as other people. You know, it from what I see, it's always just the Indigenous women standing up and trying to raise and push awareness about the protection that is needed for us. We don't see enough people outside of our own circle standing up beside us. Where are our allies? Where are our men? You know, it's just disheartening to see it come to this. Now it's just body parts thrown about. How much more disrespectful can it become before other people start to understand that this is not just an Indigenous issue? This is a human issue. These are people, these are mothers, these are grandmothers. She was 40, the latest victim, 40 years old. She's not much younger than me. I was a grandmother at 40. And I'm just thinking of all the people that are in her life that now have to live with the fact that their grandmother, their auntie, their sister, their daughter, you know, someone they loved was just thrown about like trash, like didn't even meet the, wasn't even left in a complete form, and for the family to bury. It's just ridiculous, and it's so disheartening.
Yeah. Nigan, you have a new column out about the feasibility study, which is now complete, and says the search could take 3 years or more. The cost could be upwards of $200 million. So what are your thoughts on the study and what the next step should be?
The feasibility study came out this week. It was about $500,000 to do that study with the Assembly of Manitoba Chiefs working with Ottawa. And it all came about because the Winnipeg Police Chief, upon the awareness or the fact that the Winnipeg Police know that multiple victims of the alleged serial killer in Winnipeg of Indigenous women are at the Prairie Green landfill site. And this study came up with what was going to be pretty obvious facts, which is it's very expensive, very time consuming, and even the report points out an issue of safety at that site because there is asbestos and toxic chemicals, animal remains, and so on. And so what we're stuck with is at the end, if the Winnipeg Police had not framed this as a financial issue, if they had humanized, as Carrie points out, which is a consistent problem in the humanization of Indigenous women, if the Winnipeg Police Chief, by not framing this as a cost problem, therefore now we know that this is the cost, this is the reality, and the conclusion is that if the City of Winnipeg is not willing to pay upwards than $200 million for finding the remains of Indigenous women, you are saying that there is no value in them. There is no purpose in looking for them. And most importantly, saying to the Indigenous community that when your aunties, grandmothers, sisters go missing, we're not going to do everything to be able to go look for them. And that is a huge statement, as Carrie points out, very disheartening, very frustrating, also highly genocidal and indicative of what the Murdered Missing Indigenous Women and Girls report said, which was that there is an ongoing genocide of Indigenous women, girls, Two-Spirit people in this country.
Carrie, how can the Indigenous community in Winnipeg and other cities do more to prevent future disappearances and murders?
I really don't think it's up to the Indigenous communities to do more. We've been doing more. It is the grassroots people who have pushed and continually pushed to get this national inquiry on missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. How much more can the Indigenous community be responsible for? Why is it put on our shoulders? Like I said, where are the men? Where are allies? Where are other people? Where's the government? Where's the police? Why aren't they upset? Why aren't they demanding something happen? No, they're just complacently just letting it happen and just letting us deal with it, us mourn. This is a national tragedy. This, until maybe it gets global attention, like the unmarked graves, I don't think anybody's going to do anything. It's unfortunate, but until the public is shamed into doing something, or unless, people start to realize we are people. We have just as much right to live and thrive in this country as everybody else. I don't think we can do more. Where's everybody? Where are our journalists? Where are our storytellers? Where are our artists? We need more. We need more help.
And Nigan, we're just a couple of weeks away from the fourth anniversary of the release of the National Inquiry's final report. The federal government usually makes some sort of announcement around that time. What are you expecting? What are you hoping for?
I just want to add to what Carrie said just a second ago. I think there are elements of the Indigenous community who can certainly do more. I'm thinking of those women who went to Ottawa to declare a state of emergency with MP Leah Gazan. These were members of the families of the victims of the alleged serial killer here in Winnipeg. But then, of course, I think that Indigenous men have to take it upon themselves to look to our brothers, to our nephews, to ourselves, to act better, to be better, and to particularly mentor our young Indigenous communities better, and to be better fathers, and so on. And so there are elements of the Indigenous community, I think, that needs to work much harder, and I include myself in that. Every year you see announcement by the Trudeau government to try to commit to the national calls for justice, 231 of them from the Murdered Missing Indigenous Women and Girls Inquiry. The problem is that most of those calls involve policing, child welfare, health, housing, just basic principles like how do we get police forces to speak to each other better. The problem is these are provincial things. And so you have very little uptake from almost any provincial government in this country, and it really doesn't matter what party it is, NDP, Conservative, United Conservative Party in Alberta. There is very little movement on the calls for justice by the provincial governments. They're throwing this towards the federal government, but the fact is that the jurisdiction of true change to support this issue has to come from the provinces. And the fact that there is very little leadership or interest in leadership on this issue by almost any provincial premier is egregious, terrible, and as Carrie points out, ensures that the issue will continue. We had yet another murder this week, and these are things that are just right in front of us. The solutions are all there in the calls for justice, but very little movement takes place.
Carrie Negon, we'll have to leave it there. Hopefully next week we'll talk about powwows or something like that. Appreciate both of your time.
Miigwech, thank you.
You.
And we'll have more on this later in the show when we get a preview of this week's APTN Investigates. We will also have something on Canada's largest powwow. That and more still to come. Welcome back. Time now for our photo of the day. And our own Sandra Seidel sent in this photo, which shows some mallard ducks that have taken up residency in her front yard for some cheap rent. And they don't seem to mind getting their picture taken. You can send your photos to share@aptn.ca for the chance to be our next photo of the day. Now let's take a look at your Friday weather forecast. Starting on the East Coast, 11 for Halifax, sunny and 23 in Fredericton. +2 with a chance of snow in Kuujjuaq, 6 in Nain. Sunny and 15 in Montreal, showers and 18 in Val-d'Or. Rain and 13 for Sault Ste. Marie, sun's out and 17 in North Bay. Showers and 15 in Thunder Bay, rain and 18 in Sioux Lookout. 12 with showers for God's Lake, 14 and rain in Norway House. Sunny and 21 for Winnipeg and Brandon, 20 in Dauphin. 20 in Regina, sunny and 25 in Saskatoon. Sunny and 25 for Meadow Lake, 22 under the sun in La Ronge. In northern Alberta, smoky and 28 for Peace River and 29 in Grand Prairie. 27 for Edmonton, 31 with showers in Lethbridge. Sun's out and 22 for Vancouver and Victoria, 33 in Kamloops. 27 in Prince George, 24 for Smithers. 15 in Old Crow, rain and 20 for Whitehorse. 15 in Yellowknife and Wrigley, 16 in Norman Wells. -4 with snow in Sax Harbor, snow and 0 for Paulatuck. +1 in Chesterfield, snow and 0 in Baker Lake. -8 with snow in Resolute, flurries and 4 below in Joe Haven. Well, as you've been hearing, the city of Winnipeg has become the epicenter for missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls in Canada. Tomorrow night on APTN Investigates, journalist Brittany Guillot examines the impact of a recent string of murders in the community. Here's a preview.
Camp Morgan is a permanent blockade set up at the Brady landfill, and it's been here since December 18th, and it's in honor of my mother, Morgan Harris, who was murdered by the serial killer back in December, as well as 3 other women. And this is also a tribute to all MMI WG2S and anyone else who has been lost to this tragedy.
For the last 5 months, Cambria Harris, along with community members and supporters, have been calling on government officials, the city, and the police to search the landfills for their loved ones. Camp Morgan was set up to honor the victims and help raise awareness for the missing and murdered.
So I know that you're out here quite often, but how does it feel today to be out here?
It's disheartening to still have to be here 4 months later, over 100 days, and you know that these women are still not retrieved and given proper peace and closure. So it's sad every time I come here, and it's very spiritual and very grounding, and it definitely brings you down a little bit, for sure.
You can watch the rest of APTN Investigates Voices of the Landfill tomorrow night following the APTN National News, and Brittany will join us tomorrow on the news to talk about it. Okay, back to Ottawa now, where Nation to Nation host Annette Francis is standing by with a look at who she'll be talking to tonight on the show.
Coming up on Nation to Nation, the raging wildfires in Alberta continue to displace First Nations and Métis communities. They've caused huge losses to those affected. Métis Settlements of Alberta President Dave Lamouche tells us how people are coping and what's needed to help. As well, bail reform and gun control continues to be hot topics on Parliament Hill. We'll hear what the Conservative critic for public safety has to say about these proposed pieces of legislation. And finally, one First Nations leader says Bill C-29, the act to create a National Council for Reconciliation, needs to be sent back to the drawing board. We'll see you in just a few minutes.
Thanks, Annette. Canada's largest powwow kicked off today in Winnipeg, and this year youth were front and center at the Manitowabe Festival. The 4-day festival started off with young people and featured Indigenous influencers from TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Today's event is called Next Gen, meant to celebrate youth empowerment. In the coming days, there will be fashion shows, a horse relay race, and traditional dancing. Executive Director Lisa Meaches says now is the time to come together as a people.
Today is testimony to how important it is for our community to come together in terms of reconciliation with ourselves, with other nations that they attend school with, or just hang out with, right? And so this festival provides that safe place to be able to do that.
Always a great weekend, and this year's Manitowabe looks like it might be the biggest and best yet. That's all the time we have for your APTN National News for this Thursday. For much, much more, you can head over to our website, aptnnews.ca. I'm Dennis Ward. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. Stick around. Nation to Nation's up next. We'll see you back here tomorrow.